Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston are springing up cash. Just sell us your gently used warm weather styles, like tees, shorts, sandals, and more. We're paying cash on the spot for gently used spring styles for guys and girls. Support sustainable fashion. This spring, do your thing and recycle the spring-inspired clothes, shoes, and accessories that are just hanging in your closet for cash on the spot. Let your spring clothes bloom into cash at Plato's Closet. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Recorded. Conservative talk without apology. The Regular Joe Show with Joe Gigante. Weekday evenings at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app. It's time for Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. Talk of the Town, brought to you by Big Boy. Just get in line. It moves fast. Dakota Pharmacy and Dakota Natural Health Center. We're here to help you stay well. Trademark Realty, Peak Automotive and Service, and Silver Ranch.
Good morning, my friends. I'm Steve Bach, and this is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270 with my co-host Jason Spees from The Crude Life. You can catch The Crude Life Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning. How are you doing, Mr. Steve Bakken?
I am not bad, my friend. It's been a very busy
Recording
week.
in progress.
It's been a very busy week and, kind of some busy stuff. I want to go back. Of course, we had Dustin Goverlow on, who's kind of in the center, filling in for Lori Hintz from Beck News. He's kind of in the center of what's going on with Summit Carbon Solutions, working with some of the landowners advocates and some of the legal team trying to stand up for landowner rights is what this has come down to, and public safety. But there was a big hearing that took place at the Supreme Court on Monday after the show, so a lot was detailed there. Basically, the conversation comes down to the right for the survey crews. So this is the landowners' lawsuit, and it's up in the Supreme Court right now. Hopefully we'll get a hearing back or a determination back from that in the very near future, because usually the North Dakota Supreme Court acts fairly quickly. But what's being contested goes back to the 1800s. So you've got common carrier status for public good projects, running water lines, sewer lines, things of that nature, natural gas lines, power lines, all of those things which there's common carrier status for. They're for a good of the populace. And what Summit is a private for-profit entity trying to get the same common carrier status. Well, if you recall, they went back in and did all of this survey work, and if somebody didn't want to let them on their land, they were threatening eminent domain. They sued everybody out of the gate just to get their way, kind of bully people around, and didn't sit well with a lot of people in North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, and some of these other states affected by some of these CO2 pipelines. Well, in North Dakota, under the current law, and this goes through the legislature, under the current law, you have the right to do survey for common carrier projects. They basically said, we're a common carrier and we're going to go do surveys wherever we want so that we can survey your land without your permission to be able to put in this infrastructure for a CO2 sequestering pipeline. That's sitting at the Supreme Court right now. What the landowners are asking in this lawsuit is, first of all, they jumped the gun. Summit Carbon Solutions jumped the gun on the common carrier status side of things and being able to have the ability to survey private property without the landowner's permission. But then the landowners also want to go back and go, maybe this needs to be addressed on the ability to do that, period. So this is a case that could have multiple layers of ramifications because of Summit Carbon Solutions. So we all understand that a natural gas pipeline is for the common good, power lines, common good, infrastructure for the populace, good projects. That's the common carrier status projects. But for profits trying to get that same protection, the same status, and now being able to thumb their nose at private property rights, that's a little scary. So this coming out of the Supreme Court, it could have some very, very cascading consequences.
I think so. I think the bigger question, though, is why does Summit have the courage to do this? Summit has never built a pipeline before, yet they are acting like they have authority to do a lot of things that they don't have authority to do quite yet. So to me, this is another example of how the state is directing this. The state is.
So I've got my hand up, Jason. Jason, I've got my hand up because I know this answer.
Yeah.
And this is.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
This is my opinion. But when you're empowered by the governor of a state with an agenda, then you're kind of thinking you can do anything you want because the governor's supporting what I want to do. The governor's supporting any of these landowner issues, the common carrier status.
But Steve, this goes much deeper than that.
Of course it does.
You know, there's ample evidence that Commerce has been working on this since 2019, 2018, something like that. There's evidence that Lynn Helms has been trying to prime the pump on this through legislation as of 3 years ago. There's also evidence that Drew Wrigley has been compromised because he will not investigate Carbon Summit Solutions, even though there's been a law passed to do so. He has a very liberal interpretation of a law that was passed in the last, I think, 2 legislative sessions ago. If you take away the emergency session, 1 legislative session ago. But 3 counties have asked for an investigation, and the Attorney General has basically made it go away. So he's been compromised. His special interests in this as well. So when you start taking a look at all the state officials that are involved in this, no wonder Summit has the bravado to do what they're doing. No wonder they're being so cavalier with other people's property and their property rights, Steve. That's how I'm looking at this, to be more than honest. Senator Hoeven, has he been compromised on this? Where's his leadership on this whole deal? So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered before people can really feel comfortable on this whole deal. You know, you mentioned how they're tying it to, coal, or I think you mentioned something about the grid or something along those lines. And that's another great example of how the state, in my opinion, and even Summit to some degree, has really mismanaged this, because they're really trying to, at least in my opinion, tie this with coal. But my understanding is that this is ethanol carbon, not coal carbon. I understand there are avenues that coal can take in order to do carbon sequestration, but I thought Summit was building this ethanol carbon capture deal, not a coal one. Help me out, Steve. Am I wrong on that, or what's going on here?
No, you're correct, but part of the problem lies in the fact that what's coming. So you have to take a look at the landscape right now from an environmental landscape. Now, here's the irony. You've got a bunch of environmental groups all fighting carbon sequestration, the CO2 boondoggle that we're going down. But it's coming from the EPA. You got to remember. So you've got the Biden administration that is pushing forward a climate change agenda, a global anti-carbon agenda, sequestering CO2 agenda. The regulations that are constraining traditional energy sources like coal, natural gas, oil, what's coming, and those EPA regulations can kill the industries. They're out, and I don't blame them for this. They're out, and it's only a temporary solution. That's the part that gets me a little worried, is they think this is a long-term solution, and it's not. It's a temporary solution, because if you give an inch, they're going to keep taking a foot. So if you keep backing up, it's going to get worse
in progress.
And worse and worse and worse because it's the EPA regulations that are coming down the road that are way worse than the ones now pushed forward by, and I won't even say it's this administration, it's the swamp in general. Those regulations supersede because it's a big movement. It's a big agenda. It goes beyond a White House administration. It goes beyond Biden. It goes beyond Trump. I don't know if Trump were to get reelected, I don't know how far you can back up on some of that stuff. I think you can pause it, but I don't know if you can back at that train up. That's the problem. All of this has gotten so big on a global perspective. I don't blame the coal and oil industries for going, hey, wait a minute, this is a temporary stopgap solution because we can get them off our back for a little while. Yeah, but you think that's going to make a difference? Because what's next? What's after that? What's next? It's the next. And we're up against a break, Jason. I'll get your response to that when we come back. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bakken along with Jason Spiess from The Crude Life. You can catch Crude Life Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270.
Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston are springing up cash. Just sell us your gently used warm weather styles like tees, shorts, sandals, and more. We're paying cash on the spot for gently used spring styles for guys and girls. Support sustainable fashion. This spring, do your thing and recycle the spring-inspired clothes, shoes, and accessories that are just hanging in your closet for cash on the spot. Let your spring clothes bloom into cash at Plato's Closet. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
You're tuned to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bakken along with Jason Spiess from The Crude Life. You can get your Crude Life Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270. So, Jason, it's about the EPA regulations. It's you've got an industry, a major industry in North Dakota that is so afraid of what could happen and what's coming that they're taking cover anywhere they can. And they think that, hey, we're doing our part. We're sequestering CO2. That's going to give you cover for a while. I say it's not. You give them an inch, they're going to take a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. There's a bigger agenda in place than what industries like the coal industry think that they can fight.
I think what you're going to find is that there are certain individuals in the state who are pushing for a certain narrative, and they have financial interests in a lot of the different projects affiliated with this.
Ironically, it's the globalist agenda that
you have a very small group of people using government resources to really try to gaslight the public so they can profit. That's what's happening. And if Summit doesn't figure that out, that they are in bed with a lot of very corrupt people, this pipeline's not going to work. You will have protesters show up and protest this pipeline if they continue to stay in bed with the same corrupt politicians that they've been in bed with, because the world is getting more transparent. They can try to spend as much public money and yell louder at the people all day long, but the world is getting more transparent. And people like Drew Wrigley are going to have to explain for their lack of morality, for their values. They're very liberal interpretation of the law. My guess is he won't be elected again. Burgum will this will end up being Burgum's legacy.
I thought it was
decided to die on this hill.
I thought it was Governor Casual.
Nope. He has absolutely destroyed the North Dakota marketplace. Have you taken a look at some of these job titles that exist, Steve, in the marketplace? It's more ridiculous than Minnesota's new state flag.
Well, it's not as ridiculous as...
Have you seen Minnesota's new state flag, by the way?
Oh, I have. There's 3 proposals for it. It's a geodesic... It's crazy. It's it's dumb. There's nothing wrong with the old flag.
I'm talking about the Somali one. The one that looks like the Somali flag. Yeah.
Well, my question is, so we've got the governor with a track record on the whole Be Legendary thing, which looks like crap. And if you go to a lot of social media pages across the state agencies, they're still using the Legendary, which I like the Legendary. And guess what? Didn't have to spend any extra money on that one. We already had it. I wonder how long before the governor wants to change the state flag in North Dakota, which I like.
I actually wouldn't mind if I think he would do an appropriate design. I think it would be something with. I do. I think I think he would probably have a bison no. He would do something Teddy Roosevelt. Actually, now that I think about it. I don't think North Dakota's flag would go anywhere. Is it still the crest or is it the bison?
It's the crest.
Okay. I think there is an alternate one with the bison though too, with not the NDSU bison, but with Senator Hoven's National Bison Day.
Where's the little Microsoft pixelated logo going to fit on the flag?
There's a really there's a great logo. I got some dogs going on in the studio today. There's a really great logo with kind of a bison instead of political parties. I don't know what political party that is, or what if it's like a libertarian hunting squirrels, shaving gold type symbol, but it's basically a circle and it's got a bison as the main animal. And it's a political logo. And I've always thought that's really a great logo for a party. That's a great, somebody who, instead of doing this constitutional January 6th stuff and, freedom fighting, and you got your AK-47s and all that kind of that contextual, freedom fighting, General Lee type of imagery. Put that aside. The bison has a really good Americana, almost amber grains of waves of grain type of a feel to it, as opposed to don't tread on me. Do you understand what I mean there, Steve? This is an organic thought. So,
well, I do. I do.
Anyway, okay. Sorry, I had some dogs going on there, but
I like our North Dakota crest. I used to like the Minnesota flag, but we'll see if that actually gets changed, because when I read the article on it, they wanted to be a neutral geodesic flag, which you had a great idea. If you're going to change the Minnesota flag, there's one direction you should go.
Yeah, you put Snoopy on there, fishing with Snoopy, Woodstock. That way you got the bird and you got Snoopy. It's perfect. And you got the fishing, the 10,000 lakes, the whole deal. And by the way, no offense to Somalia, I just don't really think it's going to go over very well in the Midwest, especially in the St. Cloud area. That's probably not going to be very well accepted. And I'm being totally serious, because I spoke outside of St. Cloud not even 2 weeks ago, and they were still a little bit sore about the rise in crime affiliated with the Somali population, a la Lutheran Social Services, Steve, which you know a lot about. So
absolutely. And actually, if you
I know we got the news break. So.
Okay, if you dig into that a little bit further, there's a reason they've been cutting back programs at St. Cloud State University, which, going back to the NCC and the UND and the NDSU rivalry days, and hockey and football and basketball, St. Cloud doesn't have a football program anymore. St. Cloud doesn't have a lot of programs anymore. Enrollment's down at St. Cloud. They can't get kids to go to St. Cloud State University. Part of the reason is because that population, that transient immigrant population, bought up all the campus housing. So there's no place for the kids to stay near campus, because that was cheap housing, of course. So that got gobbled up first. Well, now campus is also so dangerous because of those crime rates you mentioned. It's a hard sell to get kids to go to St. Cloud State University. So it's an extremely subsidized university within the Minnesota University program. Very subsidized. They can't get kids to go there. It's declining enrollment. It's just, it's a little frightening. It's it's not a safe campus, and in the eyes of a lot of potential students. Hey, just before we hit the break, because we're up against a break, I'll give you an opportunity to highlight our next guest.
Ryan Melton from Iowa. Yeah, we were talking about some pipeline issues, and so he's going to give us the Iowa perspective of the Summit Carbon Solutions pipeline. So after the news break, folks, we're going to have, and I believe he's running for office down there too. So he's got some passion behind him.
We'll get all the details coming up next. Ryan Melton, I'm looking forward to getting Iowa's take on what's going on with Summit Carbon Solutions. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bach along with Jason Spees from the Crude Life. You can catch Crude Life Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270.
Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.
Program schedule, updated local news, sports, contests, and more. Visit today at supertalk1270.com.
Talk of the Town, brought to you by Big Boy. Just get in line. It moves fast. Dakota Pharmacy and Dakota Natural Health Center. We're here to help you stay well. Trademark Realty, Peak Automotive and Service, and Silver Ranch. Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
You're tuned to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bach along with Jason Spees from the Crude Life. You can catch Jason Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270. And, of course, every Wednesday with Wattage Wednesday on Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. And joining us on the program, Ryan Melton. He's a Democratic candidate for the U.S. House in Iowa for the 4th Congressional District. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So I want to get a little background because we hear what's going on in North Dakota. We all see this firsthand. We just had a Supreme Court hearing on Monday for some landowners' concerns and the surveying side of this and the ability to go on to private property and survey on something that's really not a common carrier status issue. This is a for-profit business trying to turn a profit and grab low-hanging fruit financially, Q45 credits, but wanted to get the take of what's going on in Iowa firsthand. What are you seeing on the ground?
A lot of opposition to these carbon capture pipelines, and it's an issue that's really brought together a lot of disparate groups that otherwise wouldn't find common cause. So, if you get all these different groups into a room, they'll give you different reasons why they're opposed. Most would agree that the eminent domain abuse is a big problem. But you have some that are concerned about public health, the risk to public safety. You have some that are concerned about the water use impact. You have some that are really concerned about the lack of transparency from these pipelines, especially Summit. Really, I haven't seen on the campaign trail a single person that's been in favor of them. And definitely polling here in Iowa, at least the Des Moines Register poll that was done earlier in the year showed that roughly 80% of those polled in the state are opposed to these pipelines as well. Now,
I believe you wrote an editorial in a paper. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Is that where? Yeah. Okay. That's where I think I became accustomed to you and your cause down there. Are you being paid by a lobbyist group? Do you have donors that are giving you money specifically to, go and, campaign against this pipeline? Talk to me about how your relationship is with that.
Yeah, not at all. So I would encourage anyone to look me up on FEC, look up my FEC filings, look me up on Open Secrets. Compared to my opponent, Randy Feenstra, the incumbent in Congress, I reject corporate PAC money. He takes hundreds of thousands in corporate PAC money easy. So no one's funding coffers for me to go out and speak out against these pipelines. Before anyone knew who I was,
what made you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask you what made you come out and speak out against it? Was it the people that, you when you're out campaigning, this was such an issue? Is this something morally you're against? It's just, I'm curious what made you come out against it, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say all the above. It definitely started as an eminent domain concern. I thought it was an absolutely unjustifiable use of eminent domain in the fact that so many moneyed interests in our state, when I first campaigned against these back in early 22, were lockstep in favor of these. It just blew my mind that I'd argue that landowner rights, personal property rights, I mean, those are the most basic American values, and the fact that so many were willing to just throw them out the window for a quick buck was really alarming to me. So the eminent domain abuse piece was the first one, but then when you really dig into it, there are a wide variety of other concerns that I have. Definitely the public safety element. If you look at the fracture in Mississippi that endangered so many recently, the fact that in our state, every single one of our 99 counties is dealing with drought at some level. So we're already dealing with a lot of concerns with water quality and availability. These pipelines would require hundreds of millions of gallons more of our water. I go on and on. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why. The other thing, too, is I think it's a big waste of taxpayer money. The goal of that 45Q federal tax credit program is to move us in the direction of or away from the status quo to next gen renewable energy. And I think that laying these pipelines in our state would more firmly entrench us and our producers into a status quo that is clearly not working for us.
We're talking with Ryan Melton, Democratic candidate for the U.S. House in Iowa's 4th Congressional District. As far as Summit Carbon Solutions, Ryan, there's a history that goes back there with the state of Iowa. Can you give us a little background on the company itself? Because every state's a little bit different. And the impetus says it starts in Iowa and makes its way through South Dakota and Minnesota and gets to North Dakota. We're the end user. We're the destination. So we're looking at a 24-inch pipe. We're looking at large infrastructure, not the collector systems. So there's a little bit of a nuance difference from Iowa to North Dakota and what that means for the public safety side of things and the landowners side of things. Because you're right. For me, it comes down to public safety and it comes down to landowner rights. Give us a little background on Summit and their relationship in Iowa prior to this pipeline.
Yeah, so Summit is run by a guy named Bruce Rastetter. And I don't know how big of a name that is up in the Dakotas, but here in Iowa, he's arguably the most influential mover and shaker when it comes to Iowa politics. He's donated thousands upon thousands of dollars to my opponent, to our governor. And so really, if you were to talk to an Iowan about these pipelines, and particularly about Summit, Bruce Rastetter is the first name that would come up. And so that's maybe a unique Iowa piece of this puzzle. What's really interesting here is that he has given my opponent, the governor, so much money that neither of them have been able to come out and robustly stand against these pipelines. They'll say, kind of a wishy-washy piece about, I don't know about that eminent domain. But they have not been solidly on the record against these pipelines. And I think primarily it's because they don't want to make Bruce Rastetter angry, because Rastetter's been investing in those relationships for years. So, for example, my opponent, if you look at his Twitter and you just type in the word carbon, you search for the word carbon on his Twitter, all the way through 2021, he was very open and public in his support for these pipelines and wrote an op-ed about it in the paper here in December 2021. When I filed with the FEC in January of 2022 and started campaigning against them right away, he went silent on them. And now what he's doing, and what like Chuck Grassley are doing here in the state, is they're punting this by saying, this is a state issue, so I don't have to talk about it. But obviously we know that's not true, because these 45Q federal tax credits are driving these companies to come to our states and to try to lay these pipelines. So, but I'd say the unique Iowa angle is Bruce Rastetter and the amount of money he's pumped into our state and the amount of influence he has over the whole deal.
Ryan, we're coming up against a break, but you mentioned something about the local control side of things. And how does politics work in the state of Iowa? Because in North Dakota, we've got a legislature that when they like to deal with things, they deal with things. And if it's something they don't want to deal with, then they fall back to that's local control. Is that kind of how it works in Iowa as well?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of interesting ways you can approach that. So at the county level, so Story County, where I live, that's where Iowa State University is, and another county out west tried to establish setback ordinances for these pipelines. They were taken to court by Summit, and Summit won. And now we're waiting for the federal pipeline, PHMSA, that agency, to come through with their regulations in 2024. But there is another county, Kossuth County in north central Iowa, near the Minnesota border. Even after that lawsuit succeeded, they set their own setback ordinances as well, essentially in protest of these pipelines. At the state legislative level, it's a bicameral here in Iowa. There's actually a bill introduced in the state house to require that these pipelines had to get 90% voluntary easement before eminent domain could be used for these pipelines. Actually passed the House, but died in the Senate. And a lot of the reason for that is again, Rastetter and his moneyed interests are in the Senate, then they blocked the bill. That bill was introduced by, discussing the nonpartisan nature of this, was introduced by a Republican and had massive bipartisan support on the state House side before it died in the Senate.
We're talking with Ryan Melton, Democrat candidate, U.S. House, Iowa, 4th Congressional District. I'm Steve Bakken, along with Jason Spiess from The Crude Life. You can catch Crude Life Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270. More when we come.
Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston are springing up cash. Just sell us your gently used warm weather styles like tees, shorts, sandals, and more. We're paying cash on the spot for gently used spring styles for guys and girls. Support sustainable fashion. This spring, do your thing and recycle the spring-inspired clothes, shoes, and accessories that are just hanging in your closet for cash on the spot. Let your spring clothes bloom into cash at Plato's Closet. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
You're tuned to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bakken, along with Jason Spiess from The Crude Life. You can catch Crude Life Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270. We're talking with Ryan Melton, a Democratic candidate for the U.S. House in Iowa's 4th Congressional District. And we're talking a little bit about the eminent domain. And Jason, how frightening is it that you've got landowners, county commissions, local control, all being superseded by a for-profit entity?
What I find very interesting about this, and this might be the real bright spot in this whole pipeline, is I truly believe people want to broker peace. I believe that really everybody does want to come together. And that's kind of why I went on my little tirade earlier that Summit really needs to examine who the leadership is in North Dakota and who they're in bed with, because everybody that I talk to seems to be a pretty civil-minded person. Now, Ryan Melton comes from the Democratic side of the aisle, and I swear to God, Steve, he sounded like a Republican earlier, standing up for eminent domain, going against these 45Q credits, trying to reduce. I mean, next thing you know, I thought he was going to go against Obamacare. I mean, my goodness here. So
now, Ryan, if he's offending you, I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I do. But in all honesty, when you were, I was going to say, in all honesty, when you were listing the reasons why you organically came out and wrote an op-ed against this pipeline, that really spoke volumes to me about really in North Dakota, we've got a company that's based, or an organization that's funded by the Sierra Club, from my understanding, for the most part, is the Dakota Resource Council. They're taking basically the lead to help the landowners because the state is using the landowners' money against them. Talk to me about, is this bringing people together in Iowa? Are you seeing people come across the aisles and being like, hey, man, we got to work together on this? Or is it polarizing people down there?
No, it's bringing people together without a question. So down here in Iowa, so on the left, I'd say you have folks like Iowa Food and Water, the Sierra Club, the Bold Alliance that have been galvanizing people in a nonpartisan way to fight these pipelines. So the Iowa Utilities Board, which is the state entity that decides whether these companies get eminent domain, so they had their first, hearings a few months back in Fort Dodge, Iowa, and there were landowners from all political affiliations there. I was there along with entities that I mentioned. And when we get together in a room, I think there's a common understanding that we agree to civilly disagree, but put aside our political differences for this common cause because we view it as such a big issue. And so, I mean, I personally have been at numerous Iowa Utilities Board hearings with Republican, Independent, Libertarian, and Democratic landowners who are going to be impacted by these pipelines. And the vibes are good, so to speak. You know, there's not kind of a holding your nose. Like, we are in common cause. And I think everyone is just grateful for each other. We know we come from different backgrounds. There are certain angles we're entering this conversation that are maybe different from theirs. But at the end of the day, there's a feeling of unity around this. And I think the fact that, these companies, early 2022, when I first campaigned against them, people told me it was a fool's errand. There was just too much money behind these pipelines, but it was the right thing to do. So we kept campaigning against them. The fact now that these companies are kind of back on their heels a bit, it's really boosting the confidence of everyone on the ground, amplifying that unity. So no, 100% bringing people together across the aisle.
One of the things that, going back to Jason's point with the unity side of things, and I've always said this, there's some watershed moments. For example, in North Dakota, anytime that the Farmers Union and Farm Bureau are on the same page, pay attention or run. It's a big deal. You need to pay attention to it. Are you finding that as well? Because one of the things that didn't happen, we didn't get a lot of press, local press, mainstream media press. Nobody paid attention to it. And was that the case in Iowa? How did this filter up from a groundswell? Because this really has turned into a groundswell movement, one of those watershed moments.
I've got to say, I think people were paying attention to it pretty early. So I filed my paperwork for my first campaign January of 2022. And back then, if you were to go through local Iowa newspapers in Northwest Iowa, there's a lot of coverage about it. The central point of focus that really drove a lot of attention were these public hearings that Summit and these companies held for people in the community, the information gathering and dissemination sessions. And it was from those sessions that a lot of the coverage first started, where a lot of people were leaving these sessions feeling like these companies were not being transparent. We're not being neighborly, so to speak. We're not being good citizens of the community. So actually here in Iowa, at least since I started to pay attention to it, late 21, early 22, there's been a pretty decent amount of press and attention around it. Even today, if you look at small town newspapers that have even a very small circulation, the smallest of newspapers in my congressional district, you'll still see columns, op-eds about carbon capture. I'd argue it's got to be one of the top three issues.
Ryan, we're up against a hard break. If we can hold you over the top of the hour. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bachman with Jason Spies from The Crude Life, Sunday mornings 10 a.m. on Super Talk 1270.
KLXX AM, Mandan, Bismarck, a Town Square media station, broadcasting from the View Community Credit Union studio.
Take us wherever you go. Download the free Super Talk 1270 app in the App Store or Google Play today. Talk of the Town, brought to you by Big Boy. Just get in line. It moves fast. Dakota Pharmacy and Dakota Natural Health Center. We're here to help you stay well. Trademark Realty, Peak Automotive and Service, and Silver Ranch. Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
You're tuned to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bachman along with Jason Spies from The Crude Life. Also Ryan Melton, Democratic candidate, U.S. House, Iowa's 4th Congressional District, joining us. We're talking a little bit about the Iowa Utilities Board. Iowa's version of our Public Utilities Commission. Don't forget Thursday, 2 p.m., they're having a hearing with Summit and the interveners, of which Burleigh County, Emmons County, the city of Bismarck, also an intervener there, will have an opportunity to speak with their legal representation, and Summit will have rebuttal time as well. But it got me thinking, Jason, with the Iowa Utilities Board, the Public Service Commission here, the PSC in North Dakota, the difference I see is we in North Dakota have a political agenda and taxpayer dollars going in to promote that agenda here in North Dakota. I'm not seeing that, Jason, in some of these other states.
I'm very confused on the public relations, actually, Steve, because before we, had Brian Melton on as our guest, I kind of talked about how there's this weird connection of coal and this pipeline. Like we gotta save coal, so we gotta get this pipeline through. And I thought it was coming from ethanol. It was corn carbon, not coal carbon. And so, I think, okay, that's kind of a weird public relations snafu, actually, where the right hand literally doesn't know what the left leg is doing on this one. And then we've talked about down in Iowa, they don't have any problem mentioning the word, I think it was pipeline down there, but up here they don't mention it. And so they have all these different kind of ad campaigns going on in different areas. What are you seeing down there? Are you seeing that other states are confused at any sort of presentation, Ryan, or are people just focused on their local and they're not really focused on what's happening in the other states?
All I'd say, for those that are plugged in on the issue down here in Iowa, they're paying attention to what's happening in the Dakotas. I know that, not living in the Dakotas, I'm not as familiar with the nuance up there. So forgive me if I misstate something. But, when I assume the equivalent of the Iowa Utilities Board that approve or deny eminent domain requests, when they gave pushback to Summit up in North Dakota and South Dakota before our IUB started their hearings for Summit's request, that got a lot of traction down here. A lot of people are like, whoa, well, look what's happening in the Dakotas. And so I think part of the reason why was because of the proximity of those decisions to when the IUB hearings for Summit began. So we're certainly paying attention. I mean, there's no doubt about it. One of the questions that came up during the IUB hearings for Summit is, hey, if these pipelines don't go through in North Dakota and South Dakota, is this proceeding even relevant? There was an ask from the lawyers representing the landowners to stay, to suspend the IUB hearings in Iowa because of the uncertainty in North Dakota, South Dakota. The IUB board declined that request, though. But without a doubt, I mean, Iowans that are plugged into the issue are paying attention to what's happening across the pipeline path in and outside of Iowa.
One more question I have before I'll hand it off to Steve. We mentioned the Public Service Commission. We've mentioned the Iowa Utilities Board, I believe is what it's called.
Yep.
And up in North Dakota, Julie Fedorchak, she actually, I believe, owns the land where the terminus is. So the pore space underneath and the cavity. So she's recused herself from the proceedings, Julie Fedorchak, Public Service Commissioner. And so when I kind of take a look at that, that was a very correct thing for her to do. And, how she ended up with whatever is a whole different deal. But we have a Department of Commerce that really is very active on this pipeline. Do you have another department within your government that's actively managing this pipeline at all beyond
not so much a entity through the state government. What you're seeing here are the various ag lobby groups. So, for example, those acting on behalf of renewable fuels, primarily ethanol, the Iowa Corn Growers Association. I mean, there are the ag lobby groups that are lining up to start their push in support of these pipelines. You mentioned coal. Here in Iowa, it's definitely ethanol. All day, every day is the justification for these pipelines to keep the ethanol footprint that we have alive and well. And the main push is that if these pipelines don't go through, the ethanol industry here in our state will collapse. That's the number one justification that those in support of these pipelines are using. There's a secondary argument for the job creation that would happen, although that was a more robust narrative earlier on that's kind of fell apart since then, primarily because a lot of the jobs that would be created by these pipelines would be pretty much out-of-state pipeliners that would come in temporarily. And so that's kind of fallen apart as a narrative. So it pretty much is, all the eggs are in the Save Ethanol basket right now on the other side.
We're talking with Ryan Melton, Democratic candidate, U.S. House in Iowa for the 4th Congressional District. We've got another hearing coming up, Public Service Commission on Thursday at 2 p.m. What are the next steps going on in Iowa? Where are you at in the process in the state of Iowa as this works through your Iowa Utilities Board, as it works through the courts? Where are things at as far as next steps going on in Iowa?
Yeah, I'd say the two main things right now, the Iowa Utilities Board hearings are now done, but a decision hasn't been made yet by that board. So we're all just awaiting what the IUB decides. That's number one, which again, I don't even know how you make a decision as a board when the PHMSA hasn't made their decision yet as far as regulatory guidance, when you have all the uncertainty in the Dakotas. So we're waiting for IUB. And then the other piece that we're remaining interested in is the Kossuth County lawsuit that came after Story. And I think it was Shelby County out in West Iowa failed in their lawsuit for the setback ordinances against Summit. I'd say those are the two big things. And then I'd say the third thing is the federal guidance from PHMSA, just waiting to see mid-2024 what their findings are as well. Other than that, there hasn't been anything on the schedule as far as I'm aware of around any other hearings in front of the IUB for additional requests for eminent domain at this time. So kind of a little bit of a waiting period until next steps start to roll out.
As far as landowner groups and different groups that are organized against these carbon sequestration pipelines, where are they at? Is that an ongoing process, continuing meetings, continuing conversations? Because right now in North Dakota, we're kind of sitting at a little bit of a waiting game with what's going on. But it's not just the landowners, it's developers, landowners, some businesses, communities, all going to be affected. There's a lot going from the public safety side of things that counties and townships are waiting on to find out. Our big watershed moment's going to be this Thursday, and then waiting on that decision from the Public Service Commission. Where are you at as far as the organization of landowner groups down in Iowa?
Yeah, the big thing is, so if you look at the entities that have been the primary ones, the forefront of fighting these pipelines, Bold Alliance, Iowa Food and Water, Sierra Club, et cetera, they're continuing to do their best to keep this in the news. I'd have to imagine that Rastetter and Summit are pretty happy right now that there isn't anything big and active going on at the moment, because they're really hoping that things die down, that people get distracted and move on. So I know that those groups are still trying to have regular meetings, or still trying to have a presence on social media to keep the issue alive, especially considering, after Navigator pulled out in Iowa, Summit came out and said, well, that's not going to deter us. We look at that as an opportunity. So Summit's not going anywhere. And so I think in response to that, these activist groups have continued to remain as active as they can while we're waiting for next steps.
A lot going on, a little different perspective from what's going on in Iowa as opposed to what's going on here in North Dakota. Thank you for joining us, Ryan Melton, Democratic candidate, U.S. House, Iowa, 4th Congressional District. Thanks for joining us on Talk at the Town this morning.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you, Ryan Melton, Democratic candidate down in Iowa. What's going on with Summit Carbon Solutions' proposed CO2 pipeline as it's taking place in Iowa? We get the updates from Lori Hintz from Beck News each and every Monday, but nice getting a little different perspective, Jason. When we come back, we'll digest some of that. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
You're tuned to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bach, along with Jason Spees from the Crew to Life. You can catch Crew to Life Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270. Don't forget Public Service Commission hearing coming up Thursday, 2 p.m. And there's a little information, something or other, Wednesday evening before that is promoting Summit Carbon Solutions. And Beck News is actually carrying that, so you can check that out at Beck News, beck.news. Jason, some interesting perspective on what's going on the Iowa side of things. We hear about North Dakota all the time and what's going on from a county perspective, landowner perspective here in North Dakota locally. But the impetus of this, it really all starts in Iowa. And the sense I got a little bit from talking to Ryan Melton, Democratic candidate for the U.S. House, Iowa, 4th Congressional District, is where they're at right now. There's a little bit of a wait and see. Do you get that sense that there's a chicken and the egg? It's kind of like North Dakota's waiting for something to happen in South Dakota or Iowa or one of these other states so that they don't have to make a decision. Iowa's waiting on, well, if there's no place for it to go, then we don't have to make a decision. Do you get that sense at all?
I do. I get the sense that some of the other states are now starting to understand that it doesn't matter what they do if North Dakota doesn't allow it, because North Dakota is the terminus and the storage. So if the other states go ahead and pass it, but North Dakota doesn't, well, what are they going to do? They're going to have to reroute it to Kansas. I believe that's the closest reservoir that could do anything even similar to this.
And now you're looking at, again, trying not to make a decision because it's a political football, and that discussion we had about the local control side of things. Interesting. I don't want to make a decision because it might affect me politically.
Look, here's what I'll say about this, Steve, is there's a reason that the state is so focused on this. There's a reason that the people that are involved in politics are very focused on this, because it's a money grab. It's a gold rush. It's a .com. It does have a bubble burst, but there are going to be people making money. Now, we haven't talked about the carbon conference on the air. Okay. So I'm involved with a carbon conference that is going to be the week of the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. We partnered with an energy exposition. And Steve, the emails that we send out, they have a 38% open rate. That's incredible. Okay. So the activity that's coming from this carbon market, there's a reason that all of a sudden the big dogs are showing up. Do you know what they're doing at the Republican headquarters today, Steve?
No, I don't.
Everybody's getting together for their big, let's do our kickoff. So there's an organization. Do you think it coincides with their little hootenanny tonight, where all the big dogs are in town? So you have all the big dogs in town for the Summit Carbon thing tomorrow. So they're going to be doing their Republican, hey, let's do our kickoff for the election deal at noon today or 1 o'clock today. And then they have their little hootenanny tonight that they apparently have millions of dollars extra. This is what I don't understand. I don't understand how all of a sudden this company has millions of dollars to give Kathy Nessett and Scott Hennon so they can go and put on a hootenanny and try to tell people that Summit's good. The fact that Scott Hennon and Kathy Nessett are involved, people aren't going to listen. They don't have any credibility in this state. That's right. Scott Hennon and Kathy Nessett have zero credibility in the state. You, Steve, on to you.
So why do you think that is? And I know Kathy Nessett is the godmother of the Bakken. She's been professed as that. Then she went down the wind road.
Because she's followed the subsidies. And she's not from here. She's from New Jersey. So she's not a friend of ag. She's not. She might have sat on the board of Federal Reserve, and she might know a lot about oil and gas, but she's not a friend of ag. And so don't act like it. And don't tie yourself to Scott Hennon either. That doesn't help your cause.
Well,
at least not
Scott Hennon
not getting credibility.
Scott Hennon, from a marketing perspective and from a media perspective, has been nothing but a subsidy his entire career. If there's not free low hanging money for that,
No, Steve, I'm talking professionally. Listen, I like Scott. I have no problem with Scott. Scott has done a very good job of trying to survive in a very competitive marketplace. But look what he's done. He's what happened to the flag? What happened to the show on the statewide network? What happened to all these? It just crumbles and crumbles. And he's been given more opportunity than anybody.
There's a credibility issue there.
Good for him that's what I'm saying. So, and good for him for being like Mr. Wonderful and being able to tap dance and keep getting the same people to give you money. But his message, his presentation doesn't work. And
but when you sell out, but when you Jason, when you sell out and just take the check, and it's about just taking the money instead of, you know what, having principles and going, no, I'm not taking the check because that's wrong. You lose credibility.
Steve,
at some point, that's got to come back around, right?
How is it that you can have record profit years and the Tioga newspaper goes out of business? That's Kathy Nessett's home base. Now all of a sudden you've got nonprofits working as regular news organizations now. So I'm not the messenger here. All I'm doing is citing the body of work and the reason that people do not find her credible anymore. Not when it comes to whether we should trust her or not, because she's followed the check and followed the money. And she came in from New Jersey. So she has ties to oil and gas. That's her first. That's where she goes first. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. But then she's also in wind. Wind has not been very friendly to farmers. I can tell you that.
Jason, we're up against the break.
Actually been,
okay, I want to finish this conversation on the other side.
One more thing, though. Wind has been coal's biggest enemy. Now, go to you.
I want to finish this conversation up on the backside of the break because you brought it back to the coal side, and I wanted to go down that and where these subsidies lie, and a smack in the face to one of our biggest industries here in North Dakota. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bike along with Jason Spees. You can catch Jason on the Crude Life Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270.
Your destination.
Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston are springing up cash. Just sell us your gently used warm weather styles like tees, shorts, sandals, and more. We're paying cash on the spot for gently used spring styles for guys and girls. Support sustainable fashion. This spring, do your thing and recycle the spring-inspired clothes, shoes, and accessories that are just hanging in your closet for cash on the spot. Let your spring clothes bloom into cash at Plato's Closet. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
News and ideas. RM World Travel. Sunday morning, starting at 5 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app. Talk of the Town, brought to you by Big Boy. Just get in line. It moves fast. Dakota Pharmacy and Dakota Natural Health Center. We're here to help you stay well. Trademark Realty, Peak Automotive and Service, and Silver Ranch. Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
You're tuned to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bike along with Jason Spees from the Crude Life. You can catch Jason Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270. Also, our private public picks, Sarah Stogner, also myself and Jason Spees. Sarah's tied up today, but you can get her full picks on the Crude Life because you re-air those on Sunday mornings, and you can catch those online with Jason as well on several different platforms from the Crude Life. ESG University is another place. I want to come back and talk about this because we got a lot to get to before we get to our football picks in the last segment. But Jason, you mentioned the big boys showing up. A lot of that's because of the ESG stuff. How does ESG still play into this? Because ESG forefront, I remember last year at this time, we were talking about ESG University and ESG and environmental social governments a lot. It kind of got pushed to the back burner, or at least got quiet, but it's still there. And that's really the driving force for a lot of what's going on with this, isn't it?
Well, for me personally, Steve, I was just consulting a board of directors in the last month on ESG issues coming out because they have a client in Europe and they're aware that they're probably going to have to file an ESG report because Europe is moving ahead with the ESG disclosures and the ESG scores and the ESG themed financing. In the United States, it's a different story. Tennessee just sued BlackRock for its ESG's discrimination. So in the United States, the SEC has decided to wait another year for their environmental, social governance policies and legislation. However, one of the big things is that there is a task force with the SEC, and a lot of the disclosures are still being filed. So even though a lot of the states are being political with ESG, including North Dakota, the banks are moving ahead with it, and the financing, the global economic. In fact, the Chinese communications construction government just filed their ESG report today, actually, Steve, just to give you an idea what's going on, because they're going to go mining in coal. And so getting back now to what we're talking about, this whole carbon pipeline is ESG driven. ESG is driving the financing, which is driving the 45Q credits, which I think are 90 or 80. I forget which they are, but they're up now, so that it makes it so that they can profit out of the gate on this. So this is very much ESG driven. It's I mentioned earlier about the carbon conference and how the attention to it, that was ESG a few years ago. That was the mad dash a couple of years ago. Look what the state did. They tried to push everybody out of the way and control it, and they bumbled that. And I can tell you what, somebody in the oil and gas industry, they wanted to go ahead and try to get a hold of that podcast and crude life market, so they gave a bunch of money to back the Bakken. Nobody's backing the Bakken anymore. I know when a bunch of people wanted to get cannabis legalized, the state messed that up too. And now I see the state has decided they want to earmark close to $500,000 so they can do their own carbon conference. So they can educate you on pipelines. And if you're already educated, they'll re-educate you, Steve, because they're going to tell you one way to think in the state.
Well, you see that right now in you've got the legislature that just passed anti-ESG legislation, but now with what's going on out of the Industrial Commission with the funding for this carbon summit or carbon whatever they're going to call it of their own, using taxpayer dollars, which, okay, now you're fighting taxpayers and landowners that are using their own private money to try to stand up for their own landowner rights when you just came off a legislative session where there were some 8 bills that were defeated last minute because the governor's office got involved. that were standing up for landowner rights. So you mentioned that juxtaposition. This is crazy what's going on because it's lip service and no substance.
Crazy. So it's to the point to where if you try to ask your government for help, they use the resources against you. And by the way, and if you just say, listen, we don't even want that government service anymore, then that costs you too. People are getting paid to be treated poorly. They don't want it. They're tired of paying these taxes. This entitlement economy that seems to exist out there in the state of North Dakota. I mean, you have landowners asking for help, and they're getting literally sued. I mean, how is that even a thing, Steve? The humanity on this is where I think Summit needs to take a step back and start there.
Well, this goes back to that global agenda, though, Jason. Go back and look at the global agenda.
And that's fine, but that's fine, and that's ESG,
right?
That's what they're all trying to go for, and I think a lot of the people that are involved don't care about ESG. I don't think they care about ethanol. I don't think they care about carbon credits. All they care about is that they're going to get that 90Q or the 45 times 3Q that's involved, so it's a guaranteed moneymaker. That's all I think they care about.
But again, bigger picture.
And by the way, little spoiler alert here for you. Most of the politicians are already bought off. You heard how down in Iowa, what's happening down there. Spoiler alert, I'll let Dustin Goverlow from the North Dakota Watchdog Network come on the airwaves and talk about this on his own time. But talking to him yesterday, Steve, he sent out a survey to all the legislators. He only got 5 response back. He sent it out to his network of people, and all of a sudden 38 came back from the people who own the pipelines within an hour. So the people who are paying the taxes can't even get their local elected officials to represent them either. They have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to go, Steve.
All right,
this is not a good position to be in.
Just to put a bow on this, because there is that bigger global agenda, that globalist agenda, which doesn't want private land ownership. And you take a look at the ESG stuff and the CO2 stuff and the climate change agenda and all of this, how this plays back into what's going on globally and back to the United States. And take a look at that 30 by 30 land grab. And Trent Luce, who's on back, did a seminar on the 30 by 30 land grab. Well, that was an initiative out of the Biden administration, 30% of private property to get locked up by the government by 2030. There's a 50 by 50 plan. Trent didn't even know about that until they filled him in on that, because I was only aware of it because of some of the conversations that I was involved with as mayor of Bismarck, because I apparently got on the wrong email list and found out some of the Biden administration agenda concerning that. The stumbling block for this climate agenda is private land ownership and being able to do what you want to do without landowners putting up a flag or being able to stand up on their own property and their property rights. The global agenda has that in the crosshairs of where the United States can stand in the way of what that global agenda is. So now you've got legislators locally standing in the way of private property rights and private property legislation. It's a little bit bigger picture than what I think anybody wants to realize or wants to admit, but we're in trouble here, Jason. And there's more to the story, and we'll discuss it further down the road with Jason Spies. I'm Steve Bach, and this is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. Of course, Jason with the Crude Life. You can catch the Crude Life Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. right here on Super Talk 1270. When we come back, our football picks. We'll talk about how we did last week, and maybe Sarah is not available this morning because, well, she didn't fare so well. She was over 500, but you and I kind of tied. We'll talk about that when we come back. This is Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Super Talk.
Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston are springing up cash. Just sell us your gently used warm weather styles like tees, shorts, sandals, and more. We're paying cash on the spot for gently used spring styles for guys and girls. Support sustainable fashion. This spring, do your thing and recycle the spring-inspired clothes, shoes, and accessories that are just hanging in your closet for cash on the spot. Let your spring clothes bloom into cash at Plato's Closet. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
You're tuned to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270. I'm Steve Bachman along with Jason Spees from The Crude Life. Sarah Stogner, who usually joins us, she's out in the field this morning, so we'll get her take on our private public picks. We'll run that. Of course, you can catch that replayed on The Crude Life on Super Talk 1270 because we'll record our picks later on this evening, just so it's honest and fair. But a lot of football coming up this weekend, Jason, and you and I tied actually last week. We were both 11-5. I think trying to pick the Jets may have screwed you up, but you did take Detroit over the Broncos, and maybe that Giants game might have screwed you up a little bit too, but you had a pretty good week. You and I did fairly well. Sarah coming in at 9-7. But as far as the picks this week, of course, a lot of football coming up this weekend. And Jason, we're starting Thursday night football. The Prime Video game, 7:15 p.m. Central Time. New Orleans at the L.A. Rams.
Boy, that's going to be a good matchup, actually. New Orleans has been coming through a little bit more. So let's go with the Rams. I'm going to go with the Rams on this one.
I'm picking the Rams on that one as well. Stafford, and I think the Rams are going to make the playoff despite their poor start. The Vikings, I don't know if they will after their... we'll talk about that a little bit later. Cincinnati at Pittsburgh.
I got to go with Cincinnati on that one.
Cincinnati as well. Buffalo at the L.A. Chargers.
Buffalo at the L.A. Chargers. Well, Buffalo, yeah. Buffalo, of course.
Yeah, I'm going to take Buffalo on that, even coming off a big game, but the Chargers are so disheveled right now. Indianapolis at the Atlanta Falcons, coming off of their big win, of course. The Atlanta Falcons. How do you lose to Carolina? Carolina's second win of the season. So Atlanta's a little... But Indianapolis at Atlanta Falcons.
Well, I got to go with Indianapolis just out of principle. I mean, Atlanta, that's... How do you bounce back from that?
That's just it. There could be a bounce back, but I'm going to buy into the Minshew mania and actually coaching. So Minshew mania and coaching, I'm taking Indianapolis on this. Green Bay, by the way, we're on the Sunday games now because there's two games on Saturday. So the Cincinnati at Pittsburgh and Buffalo at the Chargers, both Saturday games. But Sunday games, Green Bay at Carolina.
Oh, speaking of which, can Carolina keep going? I got to go with Green Bay on this one. I mean, they got to be able... I mean, the playoffs are on the line, for crying out loud.
Cleveland at Houston. I'm going Green Bay as well. Cleveland at Houston.
Could be a good game. Chris Stroud, I believe, is not cleared to play.
Not yet.
I just read this morning. So that means no for this Sunday. I think he's not going to be cleared to play for Sunday. Concussion protocol. So I got to go with Flacco mania and go with the Browns. Unfortunately, I want to ride Houston all the way, but not without my punk quarterback.
That Cleveland defense is legit, but for some reason it just has not traveled well. It's kind of like Dallas; they just don't do well on the road. I'm going to go Houston on
the road.
Yeah, it's Cleveland at Houston. I'm going to go Houston on this one.
Not a bad pick. I mean, Houston's got a great defense, and you're right; they don't travel well.
Cleveland does not travel well. Detroit,
Flacco, man.
Speaking of traveling, Detroit at Minnesota, a game the Vikings have to win, absolutely has to win.
Did you say Detroit at Minnesota?
Yeah.
Oh wow, boy, that's not going to go well for the Vikes. But Detroit doesn't travel well, so I'm going to go with the Vikes with an upset.
All right, this is me being a homer. I'm going to pick Minnesota on this. We got about 2 minutes left, so speed round. Washington at the New York Jets.
Jets.
I'm going to go Washington on that one. Seattle at Tennessee.
Seattle.
Seattle. Jacksonville at Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay.
I'm going to go Tampa Bay as well. I'm going to buy into their quarterback. Arizona at Chicago.
Chicago with the upset. Defensive touchdowns.
Arizona plays well at home, not so much on the road. I'm going to go Chicago as well. Dallas at Miami.
Miami.
I'm picking Miami. Dallas, again, doesn't travel well, and that Miami offense just, ugh. New England at Denver.
We got to go with Denver on this one.
Denver's going to get healthy on the. I think Denver's going to win out. They get a good chance to win out and make the playoffs. Las Vegas at Kansas City.
Las Vegas with the upset.
I'm going to go Kansas City on that one, and I'm thinking Taylor might be in the crowd. New York Giants at Philadelphia.
Philadelphia's going to come back.
And I'm going to go Philly as well. And the final game on Monday night, Christmas, Baltimore at San Francisco.
Holy Hannah, let's go with Baltimore.
I'm going to go San Francisco just because they're at home, but I believe in Baltimore. Jason, those are our private public picks. Of course, you can catch the Sarah Stogner version on the Crude Life Super Talk 1270.
KLXX AM, Mandan, Bismarck, a Town Square media station, broadcasting from the View Community Credit Union Studio.
Mike Rowe here with a radical idea. If you want to see more companies make more things in this country, buy more things from more companies who make things in this country. I refer in this case to the incredible t-shirts, sweatshirts, blue jeans, and more made by my friends at American Giant. Everything American Giant makes is made in the United States. And right now, you can take 20% off your first order at american-giant.com/Mike. That's american-giant.com/Mike.